This is Professor Gita Shah teaching you Chapter 4 today. Chapter 4 is on comparative advantage and factor endowments. After finishing this chapter, you will be able to explain Heckscher-Ohlin trade model. You will be able to draw diagram the changes in production and show gains from trade after a country begins to trade. You will be able to predict the impacts on different factors of production of trade opening. You also will be able to predict the impacts on trade and production of a change in factor endowments. You will be able to illustrate the product cycle for a product as it becomes standardized in its production. You will be able to list the trade-offs between foreign investment and foreign trade. Modern trade theory. Adam Smith and David Ricardo assumed that each country would have its own technology, climate, and resources, and that these differences would give rise to productivity differences, and thus differences in comparative advantage. In 20th century, several economists developed more detailed explanation of trade in which comparative advantage of a country depends on its endowment of inputs, factors of production, to produce good. Heckscher-Ohlin trade model. The Heckscher-Ohlin trade model states that a country's factors of production, in other words, a country's endowments of inputs, are used to make each good give rise to productivity differences between countries. Factor abundance versus factor scarcity. When a country enjoys a relative abundance of a factor, the factor's relative cost is less than in countries where the factor is relatively scarce. A country's comparative advantage lies in the production of goods that use relatively abundant factors. As for example, look at the table 4.1, and it is an example of factor abundance. We have taken two countries. Look at my cursor, United States and Canada. United States has 50 machines in capital. Canada has 2 machines in capital. Labor, United States has 150 workers. Canada has 10 workers. The United States is capital abundant and Canada is labor abundant. How come you say that? Look at the capital labor ratio. Canadian capital labor ratio is 2/10 or 1/5. US capital labor ratio is 50/150 or 1/3. Since the US capital labor ratio is higher, it is the relatively capital abundant country. Heckscher-Ohlin HO trade model. The US is richly endowed with a wide variety of factors: natural resources, skilled labor, and physical capital. Expectation. The US will export agricultural products, particularly those requiring skilled labor and physical capital, and machinery and industrial goods requiring physical capital and scientific and engineering skills. Result. Major US exports include grain products made with small labor and large capital inputs, and commercial aircraft made with physical capital and skilled labor. Gains from the trade in HO model. Ricardian model assumed that each country faced a constant set of trade-offs, as for example, 2 loaves of bread for 3 tons of steel in the US because only one homogeneous input, and that is labor. The HO model assumes multiple inputs: labor, capital, farmland, and variations in quality of inputs. Thus, the PPC cannot be assumed to have constant costs. Under the HO model, each country has a rising opportunity cost of each type of production. Look at this diagram 4.1. This is United States production possibility frontier. You can see, look at my cursor, this production frontier is bored out shaped curve that shows that opportunity cost of earning steel is greater. So this production possibility curve with increasing cost. Moving from left to right, the opportunity cost of another unit of steel increases. Opportunity costs and the slope of the PPC. Here you can see that slope at point A is equal to change in units of braid over change in units of steel. Delta shows what? Change. So slope is equal to delta braid divided by delta steel at A. And you can see that is equal to the opportunity cost of steel at A. Opportunity cost of steel is measured by the slope of the tangent at the point of the production. You can see this tangent line, this line tangents at point A, and that shows the slope of production possibility curve. Figure 4.3 gains from the trade in HO model. Now here you can see the production possibility frontier, that is bored out shaped curve, and consumption possibility curve is straight curve. Now you can see that consumption possibility curve intersects production frontier at point A, and CPC prime, that is consumer price, that is consumption product curve prime, shows that it tangents to PPF at point B. So you can see that point B maximizes the income. Point B maximizes the income. So this economy will get equilibrium at point B, not at point A. CPC is the trade line of production, is at A, production at B maximizes income. Trade and income distribution. The HO model provides a more sophisticated way to analyze gains and losses from the trade because it drops unrealistic assumptions. Labor can be divided into categories of different skill levels. Other types of inputs can be included. Industries can require different mixes of various inputs. There is a systematic relationship between the factor endowments of a country and the winners and losers from trade. Let's analyze this claim further. The Stolper-Samuelson theorem, derived from HO model, assumptions: labor earns wages proportionate to its skill level, owners of capital earn profits, landowners earn rents, the amount of income earned per unit of input depends on both the demand for inputs and the supply of inputs. Demand for an input is equal to derived demand. If an output is in high demand, its price is high, and the input used to produce it receive higher returns. The Stolper-Samuelson theorem continued. An increase in the price of a good raises the income earned by factors that are used intensively in its production. Conversely, a fall in the price of a good lowers the income of the factors used intensively in its production. Figure 4.4, the Stolper-Samuelson theorem. Here you can see that our production is a frontier. In other words, production possibility curve is board out-shaped curve showing increasing rate of cost, and you can see that as you add more and more steel, you have to give up more and more units of bread. Movement along the PPC from A to B reduces economy's demand for labor and increases its demand for capital. See, as you move from A to B, reduces economy's demand for labor and increases demand for capital. The Stolper-Samuelson theorem continued. Note, not all factors used in the export industries will be better off, and not all factors used in import competing industries get hurt. Abundant factors will benefit while scarce one will be hurt. In addition, factors face the magnification effect. The change in output price has a magnified effect on factor incomes. Again, in addition, factors face the magnification effect. What is magnification effect? It is the change in output prices has a magnified effect on factor incomes. A 75% decline in the price of bread can lead to a more than 75% decline in income of labor used in the production of bread. Ultimately, the effect on income and opening of trade depends on flexibility of the affected factors. If labor is stuck in bread production and unable to move to making steel, it will be hurt much worse than when it is flexible and free to move. US avocado producers might not oppose Mexican avocado imports as fiercely as they do if they could easily move to producing other goods. Specific factors model. The HO model assumes that factors are mobile in the long run, meaning that they can migrate easily from one sector to another. The specific factors model assumes that land and capital are immobile and cannot migrate, specific factors, and labor is fully mobile and can migrate from one sector to another sector, variable factor. See, so why labor is variable factor? Because labor can fully mobile and can migrate from one sector to another. Specific factors model continued. A country's endowment of a specific factor plays a more critical role than a factor in HO model is determining comparative advantage. When trade opens, incomes rise for the owners of the abundant specific factor. The income distribution effect on labor is indeterminate as workers can easily move to the expanding sector. Table 4.2, a specific factors model. You can see here we have taken outputs for braid and steel. And look at the inputs. There are two inputs, land and capital. Okay. You can see for braid, specific factors is land, for steel, capital. For braid and steel, both, you can see labor is variable factors. Why? Because you need labor to produce braid and you need labor to produce steel. The specific factors of land and capital can be used to produce only one good, as for example, land for braid and capital for steel. The variable factor of labor is used in both braid and steel production. Specific factors model continued. The main difference between HO and specific factors, the specific factor plays a critical role. Example, Canada is relatively well endowed with land and that the United States is relatively well endowed with capital. Then Canada exports braid and United States exports steel. Table 4.3, 10 largest oil reserves. Look at this table and you can see the largest top 10 largest oil reserves. Saudi Arabia is on the top. Look at their reserves. It is 266.7 billions. And look at their export. What is the export? Look at here. Fuel export divided by total exports times 100. And you can see in the order, Saudi Arabia is on the top. Second is Canada. Third is Iran. Fourth is Iraq. Fourth is Kuwait. Fifth is Venezuela. Sixth is UAE. And you can see that Russia, Libya and Nigeria are also in the order. And you can see that top 4 countries, they export maximum amount of fuel in the oil in the world. Empirical tests of the theory of comparative advantage. Tests of theories based on factor endowments such as HO yield mixed results. Empirical tests are difficult. How to measure factor endowment or prices in an autarky, for example? Besides factor endowments, trade is affected by technological differences, economies of scale, corporate structures, and economic policies. Extension of the HO model, the product cycle. The product cycle was developed by Raymond Vernon. Production of a good is cyclical. In the early stage of production, manufacturers need to be near a high income market where consumers' feedback is greatest. Experimentation with fundamentally new designs begins to wane as product development shifts toward incremental improvements in a basic design. Product cycle. In the middle phase, production begins to shift to countries with low labor cost. Consumption of the good in a high income country exceeds its production. Production moves where labor costs are lower. Countries reach the late phase of the product cycle when consumption in high income nations begins to exceed production. Again, countries reach the late phase of the product cycle when consumption in high income nations begins to exceed production. Look at this graph, figure 4.5, the product cycle in high income countries. Look at my cursor. This is production function showing us the total production in 3 phases. You can see in the first stage, in the early phase, production in high income country is increasing at an increasing rate. Then in the second stage, in the middle stage, you can see that this production start moving towards lower labor cost countries, and you can see in the late stage, in the third stage, that production is decreasing in the country. On the other hand, see the consumption. In the first stage, consumption is less than the production. In the second stage, still consumption is increasing, but it is less than the production in the country. And you can see in the third stage, consumption in the country exceeds than the production in the country. Many manufactured goods experience a product cycle of innovation, stabilization, and standardization. Figure 4.6, the product cycle in low-income countries. Look at in the low-income countries, nothing is produced in the early stage. It starts producing in the middle stage because all the firms, they start moving from high income countries to low income countries for cheap labor. And you can see that in lower income countries, production start increasing at the increasing rate. And you can see in the late stage that in lower income countries, production exceed the consumption. Even the consumption is increasing, but rate of increasing in production is greater than increase in the rate of consumption. Low income countries begin producing during the middle period when product design and product techniques begin to stabilize. Table 4.4, top 10 Chinese exports to United States in 2011. And you can see that how countries with low income start producing good and selling them to high income countries, and you can see the items that China has exported since 2011: computers, other household goods, computer accessories and other parts, toys, shooting and sporting goods and bicycles, apparel and household goods made from other textiles, telecommunication equipments, apparel and household goods made from cotton, footwear of leather, rubber and other materials, furniture, household items, baskets, electric and other parts. China's labor endowment and the product cycle explain a large share of its exports to the United States. So you can see by all these items exported to United States, China's labor endowment and the product cycle explain a large share of its exports to the United States. Extension of the HO model, foreign trade versus foreign investment. In the product cycle, firms invest abroad instead of exporting. Some of the output may be imported back into the home country. A very different pattern from the simple Heckscher-Ohlin model where countries export one good and import another. Implications. Heckscher-Ohlin model exports one good and imports implies firms prefer to invest abroad rather than to export. They substitute foreign investment for foreign trade. Second, the part of the output that they ship from their foreign operation back into the home country is international trade, but it is handled entirely within a single firm. We call it intra-firm trade. Intra-firm trade. Intra-firm trade is an international trade between a parent company and a foreign-owned affiliate. Intra-firm trade is difficult to measure. In mid-90s, estimated approximately 1/3 of US merchandise exports and 2/5 of merchandise imports were intra-firm. Intra-firm trade. Reasons for intra-firm trade. Firms take advantage of cross-country differences in the price of inputs. See, again, reasons of intra-firm trade. Firms take advantage of cross-country difference in price of inputs. A firm may reduce distribution costs in a foreign market by operating through affiliate. Intra-firm trade is growing in importance. In mid-90s, about 1/3 of US merchandise exports and 2/5 of merchandise imports were intra-firm. OLI theory. OLI theory. Here O is for ownership, L is for location, and I is for internalization. Firms investing abroad own an asset that gives them a competitive advantage is ownership. Firms seek a production location that offers them advantages is location. Firms try to internally capture the advantages of foreign asset ownership is internalization. Offshoring and outsourcing. Offshoring is defined as the movement of some or all of the firm's activities to a location outside the home country. Outsourcing is the reassignment of activities to another firm, either inside or outside the home country. Trade in services is consistent with traditional trade models based on comparative advantage. Fundamental debate in the impact of outsourcing on jobs. Offshoring and outsourcing continued. All combinations of offshoring and outsourcing are possibilities and exist in the world economy. Some firms offshore but do not outsource, choosing to use a foreign affiliate, a foreign based operation owned by the firm in the home country. Table 4.5 shows US multinational corporations and production outside the United States, percent of total production. Now you can see in 1989 and 2009, you can see that the share of multinational activity outside the United States rose approximately 50% from 1989 to 2009. You can see the multinational activity outside the United States rose approximately 50% from 1989 to 2009. Migration and trade. Three primary factors: supply push factors, demand pull factor, social networks. Supply push factors are forces inside a nation that cause people inside a nation to think about leaving. Demand pull factors, forces that pull a migrant to a particular country or place within a country. Social networks is the ability of migrants to congregate near family or community members to more easily assimilate into new locale. The impact of trade on wages and jobs. In the short run, trade may reduce jobs in an industry that is not competitive vis-a-vis foreign industries, and to increase jobs in competitive industries. In the medium and long run, trade has very little effect on the number of jobs. The abundance or scarcity of jobs is a function of labor market policies, incentives to work, government macroeconomic policy. So in this chapter, we learned about factor endowments in international trade.